The threads of destiny are woven not by wealth, but by the kindness of a generous heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Kigoma village, where hopes seemed as scarce as the coins in empty pockets, and dreams were measured in the weight of tomorrow's uncertainty. But in a small mud brick house at the village's edge, where the scent of wood smoke mingled with the earthy smell of clay, lived a woman whose heart burned brighter than any flame. Amara Nakato. The wooden loom creaked rhythmically as Amara's skilled fingers danced across the warped threads, creating magic from simple strands of cotton. Her dark eyes, luminous with determination, never left her work. Each thread she wove carried the weight of her dreams of lifting her family from poverty, dreams of giving her younger brother the education he deserved. Amara called her mother Mama Esther from the next room, her voice heavy with worry. The yarn seller says we owe him 3,000 shillings. What are we going to do? Amara's hands stilled on the loom. She looked at the small bundle of vibrant blue yarn beside her last precious supply, worth exactly what they owed. This yarn was meant for Mrs. Kabuka's wedding kent, the commission that would feed them for a month. Don't worry, Mama, Amara called back, forcing brightness into her voice. God will provide. But her heart felt as thin as the thread she wove. Exterior village market morning. The market buzzed with morning energy. Vendors called out their wares, children chased chickens between the stalls, and the smell of roasted maize filled the air. Amara walked through the maze of stalls, her precious yarn bundle clutched against her chest like a lifeline. She paused at Khadijah's fabric stall, her childhood friend turned bitter rival. Khadijah, draped in expensive fabrics and gold jewelry, looked up with a smirk. Well, well, Khadijah's voice dripped with mock sympathy. If it isn't the village's most famous weaver. Still making those quaint little cloths? Good morning, Khadijah, Amara replied evenly, though her jaw tightened. I heard about your family's debt, Khadijah continued, examining her painted nails. Such a shame. Maybe it's time you faced reality. Some people are meant to rise, others. She shrugged carelessly. Others are meant to serve. Amara's fingers tightened on her yarn bundle. Success isn't measured only in gold, sister. Isn't it? Khadijah's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Tell that to your creditors. Amara walked the dusty path toward home, Khadijah's words echoing in her mind. The weight of her family's struggles pressed down on her shoulders like stones. Lost in thought, she almost didn't notice the figure huddled beneath the ancient baobab tree at the village's edge. An old man sat in the sparse shade, his clothes tattered and dust-covered. His back was bent with age, and his breathing came in labored gasps. Despite his frail appearance, there was something about his eyes, deep, intelligent, almost familiar, that made Amara pause. Uncle, she approached carefully, using the respectful term for elders. Are you all right? The man looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met. His gaze held depths that seemed to carry stories of 1,000 lifetimes. I am tired, daughter, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Very tired. Amara knelt beside him, her weaver's eyes automatically assessing his condition. His clothes, though worn, showed signs of quality fabric, the kind she rarely worked with. But what struck her most was the exhaustion in his eyes, the look of someone carrying burdens too heavy for his frail frame. When did you last eat, uncle? He smiled weakly. Yesterday. Or perhaps the day before. Time blurs when you're old and forgotten. Amara's heart clenched. Without hesitation, she reached into her small purse and pulled out her last 20 shillings, money meant for rice and beans for dinner. Here, she pressed the coins into his weathered palm. There's a food vendor near the mosque. Get yourself something warm. The old man stared at the coins, then at her face. Child, you don't look like you have much to spare. We have enough, Amara lied smoothly. God provides for those who provide for others. And what is that you're carrying so carefully? He asked, nodding toward her yarn bundle. Amara hesitated. It's yarn. For weaving. May I see? Something in his voice, not begging, but genuine curiosity made her carefully unwrap a corner of the bundle. The vibrant blue cotton caught the sunlight, its quality immediately apparent. The old man's eyes widened slightly. His fingers, though gnarled, moved with surprising delicacy as he touched the thread. "This is beautiful work," he murmured. "Egyptian cotton, isn't it? Hand spun. Very rare in these parts." Amara was surprised. Few people could identify quality cotton by touch alone. "You know textiles, uncle?" A shadow passed over his face. I used to. Long ago." He began to cough deep, racking sounds that shook his entire frame. Amara noticed the slight blue tinge to his lips, the way he struggled for breath. "Uncle, you're very sick. Let me take you to the clinic." "No," he wheezed. "No clinics. I just need rest." But as he tried to stand, his legs gave way. Amara caught him before he could fall, feeling how light he was, how his bones seemed to press against his skin. "You're coming home with me," she said firmly. "I won't leave you here to suffer alone." "Child, you don't understand. I'm nobody. A beggar. Your neighbors will talk." "Let them talk," Amara replied, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "My grandmother always said that we entertain angels without knowing it. Maybe you're my angel today." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "What is your name, daughter?" "Amara. Amara Nakato." "Amara," he repeated softly. "Eternal beauty. Your name suits you, child. And I am Samuel." Mama Esther's eyes widened as Amara helped Samuel through their modest doorway. "Amara, what have you done?" she whispered urgently in Luganda. "We can barely feed ourselves." "Mama, look at him," Amara replied in the same language. "Would you have me leave him to die in the dirt?" Samuel said nothing, but his knowing smile suggested he understood more than they realized. Amara helped him to their only comfortable chair, her father's old reading chair, and brought him water and their best glass. "I'm sorry our home is so simple, Uncle Samuel," she said. "Simple?" Samuel's voice carried wonder. "Child, this home has something many mansions lack: love. I can feel it in every corner." Little Peter, Amara's 12-year-old brother, peered shyly from behind their mother's skirt. "Is he staying for dinner?" Peter asked innocently. Mama Esther shot Amara a meaningful look. They had planned a meal of rice and beans barely enough for 3. "Of course he is," Amara said, ignoring her mother's worried expression. "Uncle Samuel, you must be hungry." As Mama Esther reluctantly began preparing dinner, stretching their meager supplies, Samuel watched the family's interactions with growing fascination. Despite their poverty, they moved with dignity. Despite their struggles, they chose kindness. "Amara," he said quietly, "tell me about your weaving." Her face lit up, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "It's not much, but it's my passion. My grandmother taught me when I was Peter's age. She said that weaving is like life: individual threads may break, but when woven together, they become strong enough to last generations." "Wise woman. May I see your work?" Amara hesitated, then brought out a half-finished Kent cloth, her personal project, woven in her spare time with leftover threads. The pattern was intricate, the colors carefully balanced. It wasn't fancy, but it showed exceptional skill and artistry. Samuel's hands trembled as he examined the cloth. His eyes grew distant, almost pained. "This is extraordinary," he whispered. "The tension is perfect, the pattern complex yet harmonious. Who designed this?" "I did," Amara said shyly. "I dream in patterns sometimes. I see colors and shapes, and I try to weave what I see." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Child, do you know what you have?" "A hobby that doesn't pay the bills," Amara laughed bitterly. "No," Samuel's voice was firm. "You have a gift. A true gift." During dinner, a simple meal of rice, beans, and vegetables that Mama Esther somehow made taste like a feast. Samuel shared stories of distant places and ancient weaving traditions. Peter hung on every word, and even Mama Esther found herself warming to their mysterious guest. In Morocco, Samuel said, I once saw weavers who could create patterns so complex they seemed to move in the candlelight. In India, I met artisans who spun gold into thread finer than human hair. But I have rarely seen raw talent like yours, Amara. You've traveled so much, Uncle, Peter said with wide eyes. What work did you do? Samuel's smile became sad. I was involved in textiles, import and export. But that was long ago, before I lost everything. What happened? Amara asked gently. Pride, Samuel said simply. I forgot where I came from. I forgot the people who helped me when I had nothing. And when my world collapsed, I found myself alone, truly alone. The room fell silent except for the evening sounds of the village, distant laughter, roosters calling, the soft rush of wind through the acacia trees. But loneliness can be a teacher, Samuel continued. It taught me to see what really matters. And tonight, sitting here with your family, I remember what I lost, not money or businesses, but connection. Love. Purpose beyond profit. Samuel's coughing had worsened during the night, but he insisted on sitting outside to watch Amara work at her loom. Despite his illness, he seemed fascinated by her process. The warp threads represent our foundation, our values, our character, Amara explained as she worked. The weft threads are our choices, our actions. Each pass of the shuttle is another day of life, weaving together to create the pattern of who we become. Beautiful philosophy, Samuel murmured. Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. She used to say that every thread has purpose, even the broken ones. Sometimes the most beautiful patterns come from finding ways to incorporate the flaws. Samuel watched her fingers move with practiced grace, noting how she unconsciously adjusted for tiny variations in the thread thickness, how she seemed to sense exactly where each color should go. Amara, he said carefully, what would you do if you had unlimited resources? If money were no object? She paused in her weaving, considering. I'd create a workshop not just for weaving, but for all the traditional arts. I'd bring in master craftspeople to teach the young ones. I'd help families like mine discover that their skills have value beyond mere survival. And for yourself? For myself? She smiled dreamily. I'd love to learn the old patterns, the Royal Kent designs, the ancient Bogolan techniques from Mali, the intricate Kent patterns that tell stories of our ancestors. I'd create pieces that don't just clothe the body, but speak to the soul. Samuel nodded slowly. And what stops you? Amara's expression grew heavy. Reality, Uncle. Dreams don't pay debts or buy food. Tomorrow I have to sell my last good yarn just to keep our creditors from taking our loom. Your last yarn? She gestured to the blue bundle, still wrapped near her workspace. It's enough for one final commission. After that, she shrugged. I'll have to find other work. Maybe cleaning houses or working in someone else's shop. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Interior Amara's home evening. As they shared another sparse meal, Samuel seemed lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. Amara, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, Uncle. If someone offered to buy your yarn, all of it, for enough money to clear your debts and buy new supplies, would you sell? Amara's eyes widened. Uncle, that yarn is worth maybe $100. No one would pay enough to. But if they did? She was quiet for a moment. I suppose I would have to. But who would make such an offer? And why? Samuel smiled mysteriously. Sometimes the universe works in unexpected ways, child. That night, as Samuel lay on the mat they'd made for him in the main room, he pulled out a battered cell phone, surprisingly modern for a beggar. His fingers moved swiftly over the screen, sending messages, making quiet calls. From her room, Amara heard the soft murmur of his voice but couldn't make out words. She wondered what business a homeless old man could have at such a late hour. Word had spread through the village about Amara's mysterious guest. As she walked through the market, she caught whispered conversations and pointed stares. She's harboring a vagrant. Probably stealing from her while she sleeps. That family always makes poor choices. At Khadijah's stall, the gossip reached a crescendo. Amara! Khadijah called out with false sweetness. I hear you've opened a charity home for beggars. How noble of you! His name is Samuel, and he's a guest in our home, Amara replied evenly. A guest? Khadijah's laugh was sharp. Sister, guests bring gifts, not empty hands and empty stomachs. When will you learn that kindness without wisdom is just foolishness? Several other vendors murmured agreement. In a community where everyone struggled, resources shared with outsiders seemed like resources stolen from neighbors. Maybe Khadijah is right, muttered Mama Grace, an elderly woman who'd known Amara since childhood. Maybe it's time to think about your own family first. Amara felt the weight of their judgment, the pressure of community disapproval. But then she remembered Samuel's eyes, the depth of gratitude, the intelligence hidden behind his frail exterior, the way he listened to Peter's stories with genuine interest. We all make our choices, she said quietly. I choose to believe that kindness is never wasted, even when we can't see its purpose. Interior Amara's home late morning. She returned home to find Samuel sitting with Peter, helping him with his mathematics homework. The old man's explanations were clear and patient, revealing an education far beyond what his appearance suggested. Uncle Samuel knows everything, Peter announced excitedly. He helped me understand fractions by explaining how thread counts work in weaving. Amara watched them together, the eager boy and the gentle old man, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Samuel, she said softly, may I ask you something personal? Of course, child. You're not really just a beggar, are you? Samuel's smile was sad. What makes you say that? Little things. The way you identify quality cotton by touch. Your education. The way you understand Peter's schoolwork better than most teachers. Even your phone, I've seen you using it at night. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Would it change how you treat me if I were more than I appear? No, Amara said immediately. But it might help me understand why you seem so lost. Lost, Samuel repeated thoughtfully. Yes, that's exactly what I am. I spent so many years climbing that I forgot to look down, forgot the people who helped me reach the heights. And when I fell, oh, how far I fell, I discovered that wealth without love is the deepest poverty of all. What happened to your family? I never made time for one, Samuel said simply. I was too busy building an empire to build a home. Too busy making money to make memories. And when my empire crumbled through my own arrogance and poor judgment, I found myself with nothing. Not even the basic human connections that make life worth living. Peter looked up from his homework. But you have us now, Uncle Samuel. You're part of our family. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. Yes, little one. Yes, I am. A black SUV pulled up outside their modest compound, its presence as jarring as a spaceship in their simple village. Mr. Waswa, the yarn supplier, emerged with 2 security guards. Amara Nakato, he called imperiously. Your payment is 3 days overdue. I'm here to collect my merchandise or my money. Amara came out, wrapping her headscarf more tightly around her shoulders. Behind her, Samuel appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a walking stick Peter had found for him. Mr. Waswa, please, I just need 1 more day. I have a buyer coming. You've had weeks, Waswa interrupted. I'm running a business, not a charity. Either pay me 3,000 shillings right now, or I take the yarn and your loom as collateral. The loom? Amara's voice broke. Sir, that loom is my livelihood. Without it, I can't work at all. Should have thought of that before you decided to play nursemaid to street vagrants, Waswa sneered, glancing at Samuel with obvious disgust. Samuel stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying unexpected authority. Sir, perhaps we could discuss a payment plan. Who are you to interfere, old man? Waswa snapped. This is between me and my debtor. I am someone who recognizes the value of what you're about to destroy, Samuel replied calmly. Waswa laughed harshly. Value? This little weaver makes nice crafts for village women. I'm talking about business, about money. So am I, Samuel said, and something in his tone made everyone pause. But before he could continue, his breathing became labored. The stress and confrontation triggered another coughing fit, this one worse than any before. Blood speckled his lips as he doubled over, gasping. Uncle Samuel! Amara rushed to his side, forgetting entirely about Waswa and the debt. Someone call a doctor! She shouted to the growing crowd of curious neighbors. No doctor will come for a beggar without payment upfront, Waswa said coldly. And you clearly have no money for doctors any more than you have money for yarn. Samuel gripped Amara's arm with surprising strength. The yarn? He whispered urgently. Give him the yarn. Uncle, no. That's my last. Trust me, child. Give him the yarn. Tears streaming down her face, Amara looked at her precious blue cotton, her final hope, her last chance. Then she looked at Samuel, this man who had somehow become family in just a few days, who was now struggling for each breath. Take it, she told Waswa, her voice breaking. Take the yarn. Waswa nodded to his men, who collected the bundle. Your debt is cleared, but just barely. Next time, think about your priorities before you take in strays. As the SUV drove away, Samuel collapsed. Amara caught him, feeling how his fever had spiked, how his pulse raced weakly under her fingers. Peter, run to the clinic. Tell Dr. Mikasa it's an emergency. Amara, Samuel whispered, his voice barely audible. There's something. Something I need to tell you. Save your strength, Uncle. Help is coming. No, listen. His grip on her hand was desperate. I'm not who you think I am. But before he could say more, his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. Dr. Mikasa emerged from the treatment room, his expression grave. I've stabilized him for now, but he needs real medical care, the kind we can't provide here. His condition is serious. Without proper treatment. What kind of treatment? Amara asked desperately. Cardiac specialists, advanced diagnostics, possibly surgery. He needs to be in Kampala, at Malego Hospital or one of the private facilities. How much would that cost? Dr. Mikasa's sympathetic look told her everything. More than most families here see in years, Amara. I'm sorry. Amara sat beside Samuel's bed, holding his weathered hand. He looked so frail, so vulnerable. How had this stranger become so important to her in such a short time? I won't let you die alone, she whispered. I promise. Exterior clinic night. As Amara sat vigil, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hello? Is this Amara Nakado? The voice was professional, speaking English with a crisp accent. Yes, who is this? My name is David Kamani. I'm calling from Nairobi regarding Samuel Aching. I understand he's in your care. Amara's heart raced. How do you know about Samuel? Ms. Nakado, I need you to listen carefully. Samuel Aching is not who you think he is. He is the founder and former CEO of Aching Textiles International, one of the largest textile companies in East Africa. The world seemed to tilt around Amara. That's impossible. He's a beggar. He has nothing. 3 years ago, Samuel lost everything in a hostile takeover orchestrated by his business partners. They used his trust against him, stole his company, and left him with nothing. But Ms. Nakado, in the past week, something has changed. What do you mean? He's been making calls, activating old contacts, liquidating hidden assets. Assets that his former partners never found. He's been rebuilding. Amara's mind reeled. Why are you telling me this? Because he's asked me to offer you something. Ms. Nakato, Samuel wants to buy your weaving patterns, all of them. He's prepared to offer you $50,000 as an advance against future royalties. 50,000. Amara couldn't process the number. It was more money than her family had ever dreamed of. There's more. He wants to make you the chief designer for his new company Nakato Achin Traditional Textiles. He says your talent is exactly what he's been searching for to rebuild his legacy. I don't understand. Why me? Why now? David's voice grew warm. He said to tell you that sometimes the universe sends us angels, and sometimes we're too proud to recognize them. He said you reminded him of what business should be, not just about profit, but about people, about preserving beauty and tradition, about lifting others as we climb. Amara sank onto a bench outside the clinic. Is this real? Very real. Ms. Nakato, Samuel Achin was once worth over $50 million. Even after his losses, he's managed to recover enough to fund this new venture. But he says none of it matters if he can't find people who share his vision, people like you. He's dying, Amara whispered. The doctor says he needs expensive treatment. Already arranged. A medical helicopter is en route from Nairobi. Samuel will be flown to the best cardiac facility in East Africa. Money is no object. Through the clinic window, Amara could see Samuel lying still on the narrow bed. Her mind struggled to reconcile this image with what she was hearing. David, she said slowly, if he has all this, why was he living like a beggar? Because he was testing himself, and testing the world around him. After losing everything, he needed to know if kindness still existed, not kindness motivated by wealth or status, but pure human compassion. He spent months wandering, experiencing how society treats those with nothing. Most people ignored him, some were cruel, a few offered minimal help. But you, Ms. Nakato, you treated him like family. You gave him your last money, your last yarn, your only comfortable chair. You defended him against community pressure, and chose his welfare over your own survival. Tears streamed down Amara's face. He was testing me? No, David's voice was firm. He was testing himself. Could he still recognize genuine goodness when he saw it? Could he distinguish between people who loved money and people who loved each other? You weren't being tested, Ms. Nakato. You were being discovered. The Nakato Achin Traditional Textiles workshop hummed with activity. 20 young people from the village and surrounding areas worked at modern looms, learning traditional patterns while creating contemporary designs. The building itself was a masterpiece, modern facilities housed within traditional architectural forms, air-conditioned but decorated with local art. Amara moved between the workstations like a master conductor, offering guidance and encouragement. Her own designs now hung on the walls, intricate pieces that had caught the attention of fashion houses in Paris and New York. The tension needs to be even across all threads, she instructed a young apprentice. Think of it like singing in a choir, every voice must harmonize with the others. Samuel watched from his office, a glass-walled space that kept him connected to the workshop floor. His health had improved dramatically with proper medical care, and the light had returned to his eyes. A knock on his door interrupted his observation. David entered with a stack of international orders. The response has exceeded all projections, David reported. We have orders from Milan, Tokyo, New York. Everyone wants authentic African luxury textiles by Amara Nakato. Good, Samuel nodded. But remember, growth must be sustainable. We're not just building a business, we're preserving a culture and lifting a community. Through the glass, they watched as Amara helped Peter, now 13, and one of their most promising apprentices perfect a complex Kent pattern. She never lets success go to her head, David observed. Still treats everyone like family. That's why this works, Samuel said. Success without humility is just another form of poverty. Exterior workshop compound evening. The day's work was ending, and workers were heading home with dignity in their step and money in their pockets. Amara stood in the courtyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades that reminded her of her favorite weaving threads. Samuel joined her, moving slowly but steadily. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About what?" "About taking in a sick old beggar instead of selling your yarn to pay debts." Amara smiled. "Uncle, sorry, Samuel, that sick old beggar changed my life, my family's life, and the life of this entire community. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? Even though I deceived you about who I was?" "Did you?" Amara looked at him thoughtfully. "When you sat under that baobab tree, exhausted and alone, weren't you exactly who you appeared to be? A man who had lost everything that mattered. Your money was gone, your company was gone, your health was failing. In that moment, you truly were just Samuel, hungry, sick, and desperately needing human connection." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "You see clearly, Amara." "Yes, that's exactly who I was. Everything else, the business knowledge, the hidden assets, the connections, those were just tools waiting to be rediscovered. But the man under that tree was real. And the man standing here now? Is the same man, but remembered. Reminded of what matters. Grateful beyond words for a second chance." They stood in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared. "Samuel," Amara said eventually, "what happens now? Where do we go from here?" "We keep growing, but we never forget to grow others along with us. We preserve the old ways while embracing new possibilities. We prove that business can be a force for good, that profit and compassion aren't enemies." He paused, looking at the workshop where security lights were beginning to illuminate the courtyard. "And we remember that every thread has purpose, even the broken ones. Sometimes the most beautiful patterns come from finding ways to incorporate the flaws." Amara laughed. "You sound like my grandmother." "I'll take that as the highest compliment." The helicopter's rotors had barely stopped spinning when Samuel was loaded onto a stretcher and whisked away to Nairobi. But not before he gripped Amara's hand one final time. "Trust David," he had whispered. "Trust the process. And trust yourself." Now, 7 days later, Amara stood in front of her home as another helicopter approached, this one carrying Samuel back to the village, along with David Kamani and a small team of assistants. The entire village had gathered to witness this unprecedented event. Khadija stood at the front of the crowd, her earlier smugness replaced by obvious confusion and growing concern. Samuel emerged from the helicopter looking transformed. Still thin, but standing straighter. Still wearing simple clothes, but moving with quiet confidence. The haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by something bright and determined. "Amara," he approached her with open arms. "My dear child. How can I ever thank you?" "Uncle Samuel," she began, but he held up a gentle hand. "Not uncle. Samuel. Just Samuel. And not your uncle, your partner." He turned to address the gathered crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the compound. "People of Kigoma Village, I owe you an explanation. My name is Samuel Aching, and until recently, I was a broken man, broken by my own pride and poor judgment. I came to your village not as a businessman or a wealthy man, but as someone who had lost his way." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Khadija's face had gone pale. "But in this humble home," Samuel gestured to Amara's house, "I found something I thought was lost forever. I found kindness without expectation, love without condition, generosity that flowed from abundance of spirit rather than abundance of wealth." He turned back to Amara. "This young woman taught me that true wealth isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away. Not what we hoard, but what we share. She gave me her last money, her last yarn, her family's food, and most importantly, her respect and dignity when the world saw only a worthless beggar." David stepped forward, carrying a leather briefcase. "Ms. Nakato, if you're ready, we have papers to sign." Amara looked around at the faces of her neighbors, some stunned, some skeptical, some beginning to show excitement as they realized what was happening. "Samuel," she said quietly, "I need to understand. Is this real? All of it?" As real as the kindness you showed me, Samuel replied. As real as the talent in your hands and the vision in your heart. Then yes, Amara said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I'm ready. The first annual East African Traditional Textiles Exhibition was in full swing. Buyers, designers, and textile enthusiasts from around the world examined displays of gorgeous fabrics, each piece tagged with the story of its creator. Amara stood before a massive wall display of her latest collection, Threads of Destiny, each piece telling the story of someone who had overcome adversity through creativity and community support. A reporter approached with a cameraman in tow. Ms. Nakato, your rise from village weaver to international designer reads like a fairy tale. What would you say to young people who feel trapped by poverty or circumstances? Amara considered the question, her fingers unconsciously stroking a piece of the original blue yarn Samuel had convinced her to part with, now framed and displayed as the cornerpiece of their company's origin story. I would tell them that kindness is never wasted, even when we can't see its purpose, she said. I would tell them that our circumstances don't define our worth, our character does. And I would tell them that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as the heaviest burdens. The reporter nodded, clearly moved by her words. And what about the critics who say this story is too good to be true? That fairy tales don't happen in real life? Amara's smile was gentle but firm. Fairy tales happen every day, but only for those brave enough to choose kindness over fear, generosity over selfishness, hope over despair. The magic isn't in the money or the success, it's in the moment we decide to see the humanity in every person we meet. From across the exhibition hall, Samuel watched the interview with pride. Beside him stood Dr. Christine Akinyi, a renowned textile historian from the University of Nairobi, who had become a close advisor to their company. She's become quite the philosopher, Dr. Akinyi observed. She always was, Samuel replied. I just gave her a platform to share what she already knew. Exterior exhibition hall later that evening. As the exhibition wound down, Amara and Samuel walked through the emptying halls, past displays of beautiful textiles from across the continent. The success of the event was evident. Dozens of new partnerships had been formed, young designers had found international buyers, and traditional crafts were being celebrated on a global stage. Do you remember what you told me that first day? Samuel asked. About dreams not paying bills. Amara laughed. I remember being very foolish and very frightened. You were neither. You were realistic about your circumstances while maintaining hope for something better. That's not foolishness, that's wisdom. They paused in front of a display case containing some of Amara's earliest work pieces she had created with that precious blue yarn, now selling for thousands of dollars to collectors. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, Amara admitted. Sometimes I wake up expecting to find myself back in that little room with my old loom, wondering how to pay for yarn. And would that be so terrible? Samuel asked gently. Amara considered this. No, she said slowly. Because even then, I had what mattered most: family, purpose, hope. The rest is just decoration. Beautiful decoration, Samuel smiled, but decoration nonetheless. The company had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. From the original workshop in Kigoma village, they now operated 12 facilities across Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, employing over 300 people and exporting to 37 countries. But with success came challenges Amara had never anticipated. She sat in a glass-walled conference room, facing a group of international investors who wanted to take the company public. Ms. Nakato, said Mr. Harrison, a sharp-suited man from a London investment firm, your growth trajectory is impressive, but you're leaving money on the table. Mass production, synthetic materials, overseas manufacturing, these could triple your profit margins. At what cost? Amara asked. Cost? Harrison looked confused. I'm talking about reducing costs. I'm talking about the cost to our artisans, to our communities, to the authenticity that makes our products valuable in the first place. Another investor, Ms. Chen from Hong Kong, leaned forward. Ms. Nakato, With all due respect, authenticity is a marketing concept. What matters is profit and growth. Your shareholders. We don't have shareholders, Amara interrupted. We have partners. Every artisan who works with us owns a stake in our success. The room fell silent. This was clearly not what the investors had expected to hear. Harrison tried again. Look, your heart is in the right place, but business is business. You can't run a company on sentiment. Can't I? Amara stood and walked to the window overlooking the bustling streets of Kampala. Mr. Harrison, do you know why our textiles command premium prices in New York and Paris? Quality, I assume. Story, Amara corrected. Every piece tells a story. The woman who spun the thread, the village where the cotton was grown, the pattern that's been passed down through generations. When someone buys our fabric, they're not just buying cloth, they're buying connection to something real, something meaningful. She turned back to face the group. The moment we start mass producing in factories, using synthetic materials, cutting corners to maximize profit, we lose that story. We become just another textile company. And there are thousands of those. Ms. Chen's expression was skeptical. Stories don't show up on balance sheets. Don't they? Samuel's voice came from the doorway as he entered the conference room. Our profit margins are currently 37% above industry average. Our customer retention rate is 93%. We have a 6-month waiting list for custom orders. All because of those stories. He took a seat beside Amara. Ladies and gentlemen, you're thinking like 20th century business people in a 21st century market. Today's consumers don't just want products, they want purpose. They want to feel good about their purchases, to know they're supporting something meaningful. Harrison's jaw tightened. Mr. Aching, with respect, your approach isn't scalable. You can't maintain these boutique practices while achieving serious growth. Can we? Samuel smiled. We've grown 400% in 18 months while maintaining our core values. Our workers earn 3 times the regional average wage. Our communities have seen measurable improvements in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. And our profits continue to grow. But imagine what they could be, Ms. Chen began. Imagine what they could cost, Amara interjected. Mr. Harrison, Ms. Chen, I appreciate your interest, but I think we have fundamentally different definitions of success. After the investors left empty-handed and clearly frustrated, Samuel and Amara sat alone in the conference room. That won't be the last such meeting, Samuel warned. I know, Amara sighed. Sometimes I wonder if we're fighting a losing battle. The pressure to compromise, to cut corners, to prioritize profit over people is constant. Do you know what I learned during my years of failure? Samuel asked. I learned that there are 2 ways to build a business. You can build it on extraction, taking as much value as possible while giving as little as possible back. Or you can build it on cultivation, creating value that benefits everyone involved. He gestured toward the window, where the lights of Kampala twinkled in the growing darkness. The extraction model might make you rich quickly, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, you run out of things to extract, people to exploit, corners to cut. But the cultivation model? That can grow forever, because you're creating value rather than just moving it around. And you think our approach is sustainable? I think our approach is the only approach that matters in the long run. But it requires courage, Amara. The courage to say no to easy money, to resist pressure from people who only see balance sheets, to trust that doing right will ultimately be profitable. Amara nodded, but she looked tired. The weight of leadership, of being responsible for so many livelihoods, was heavier than she had anticipated. Samuel, she said quietly, what if I'm not strong enough? What if the pressure becomes too much and I make the wrong choices? Samuel reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand that had once pressed her last 20 shillings into his palm. Amara, do you remember what you told me about weaving? About how individual threads might break, but when woven together, they become strong enough to last generations. Yes. You're not carrying this alone. You have partners, advisors, a community of artisans who believe in what we're building. You have the strength of everyone who benefits from our success. And you have the knowledge that what we're doing matters not just financially, but morally. He squeezed her hand gently. The girl who gave her last yarn to save a stranger has the strength to resist pressure from investors who only see dollar signs. Despite the company's success and their new headquarters in Kampala, Amara made it a point to return to the village regularly. The original workshop had been expanded and modernized, but it still felt like home. This morning, she was troubled. Word had reached her about problems at one of their newer facilities, reports of workers being pushed too hard, of quality standards slipping, of the personal touch that made their products special being lost in the push for increased production. She found Samuel in the courtyard of the original workshop, sitting under the same baobab tree where they had first met. He was reading reports, his expression serious. "How bad is it?" Amara asked, settling beside him on the wooden bench they had installed beneath the tree. "Bad enough," Samuel sighed. "The Mombasa facility is behind schedule on 3 major orders. The manager is pushing for longer hours, shorter breaks, and he's hired additional workers without proper training. That's the opposite of everything we stand for." "I know. And it gets worse. 2 of our original artisans from the pilot program have quit, saying the work environment has become too pressured, too focused on quantity over quality." Amara felt sick. These were people who had trusted her, who had believed in her vision of a different kind of business. "How did this happen?" "We have oversight protocols, regular visits." "We got too big too fast," Samuel said simply. "When you have 12 facilities across 3 countries, it becomes impossible to maintain direct oversight of everything. We delegated authority without ensuring our values were truly understood and embraced." A young woman approached them, Grace Nakiwala, one of their first apprentices who now served as a quality supervisor. "Amara, there's something else you need to know," Grace said, her expression troubled. "There are rumors that Mr. Okello, the Mombasa manager, has been selling substandard pieces under our brand name to budget retailers. Pieces that don't meet our quality standards." Amara's heart sank. This was her worst nightmare, their reputation, built on authenticity and quality, being compromised for short-term profit. "Do we have proof?" "I've been investigating quietly," Grace said. "I have photographs, invoices, and testimonies from 2 workers who were told to lower their standards to meet quotas." Samuel's jaw tightened. "This ends now. Amara, we need to go to Mombasa immediately." "What about the orders? If we shut down production or fire the manager, we'll miss major deadlines. We could lose clients, damage our reputation for reliability. And if we don't act, we'll damage our reputation for integrity," Samuel replied firmly. "Which do you think is more important in the long run?" Amara knew he was right, but the business implications were staggering. They had commitments to major fashion houses, department stores, and boutique retailers. Failing to deliver could cost them millions and potentially destroy relationships they had worked years to build. "There's another option," Grace said quietly. "We could quietly remove Mr. Okello, bring in a new manager, and gradually correct the problems without disrupting production too much." "A quiet solution," Samuel mused. "Sweep the problems under the rug, hope nobody notices, and try to fix things behind the scenes." "It would be the practical choice," Amara said, but her voice lacked conviction. Samuel looked at her carefully. "Is that what your grandmother would have done?" The question hit like a physical blow. Amara could almost hear her grandmother's voice. "Child, when you compromise your values for convenience, you lose more than you gain. The thread of integrity, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair." "No," Amara said firmly. "No, she would have done what was right, regardless of the cost." "Even if it meant losing everything?" "Especially then. She used to say that what we do when no one is watching defines who we really are. But what we do when everyone is watching, that defines what we stand for." Interior airplane to Mombasa later that day. As their small chartered plane flew over the landscapes of Kenya, Amara stared out the window at the patchwork of farms and forests below. Each field represented families, communities, livelihoods. Just like the communities they served. Samuel, she said, tell me honestly, are we doing the right thing? Shutting down production, firing the manager, potentially losing major clients? I can't tell you that, Samuel replied. Only you can decide what kind of leader you want to be. But I can tell you this: the easy choices rarely build character, and the hard choices rarely destroy it. He pulled out a folder of documents. These are contracts we could sign tomorrow. 3 major retailers want to triple their orders, but they want lower prices. We could meet those prices by cutting wages, reducing quality controls, and moving production to cheaper facilities. And we'd make a fortune. We'd be one of the largest textile companies in Africa within 2 years. But we'd also be just another textile company. Another business that started with noble intentions and ended up prioritizing profit over people. Amara took the contracts and read through them. The numbers were staggering: enough money to secure her family's future for generations, to fund expansion across the continent, to become a truly international corporation. The temptation is real, she admitted. It always is. That's what makes it a test. Exterior Mombasa facility afternoon. The Nakato Aching facility in Mombasa was their largest and most modern. From the outside, it looked impressive: a gleaming building with solar panels, landscaped grounds, and the company logo prominently displayed. But as Amara and Samuel walked through the production floor, the problems became immediately apparent. Workers hunched over their looms, faces tense with stress. The usual hum of conversation and laughter that characterized their other facilities was absent. Quality control stations sat empty, and finished products were being packed without the careful inspection that was their standard practice. Mr. Okello greeted them with nervous enthusiasm. A tall, thin man in his 50s, he had impressive credentials and had been recommended by a prestigious consulting firm. Ms. Nakato. Mr. Aching. What a wonderful surprise. I wasn't expecting you until next month. That was the idea, Samuel said dryly. I hope you're pleased with our progress. We're ahead of schedule on the Bergdorf-Goodman order and close to completing the Harrods Commission. Amara walked over to one of the quality control stations, where finished Kent scarves were stacked awaiting inspection. She picked up a piece and examined it closely. The pattern was correct, but the thread tension was uneven, and the colors were slightly off, subtle flaws that most customers wouldn't notice but that fell below their stated standards. Mr. Okello, she said quietly, this doesn't meet our quality specifications. Well, perhaps not technically, but the customer will never notice. And we're under tremendous pressure to deliver. Our customers trust us to deliver excellence, Amara interrupted. Not good enough, not they'll never notice excellence. She turned to address the workers, speaking in Swahili so everyone could understand. My brothers and sisters, please stop your work for a moment. I need to speak with all of you. The production floor gradually fell silent as workers looked up from their looms and cutting tables. I want to apologize, Amara continued. We created this company with the promise that work should be dignified, that artisans should be partners, not just employees. If that promise has been broken here, the fault is mine. Mr. Okello looked increasingly uncomfortable. Several workers exchanged glances, clearly surprised to hear such words from the company's founder. I also want to make something clear, Amara's voice grew stronger. Quantity is never more important than quality. Speed is never more important than safety. Profit is never more important than people. If anyone has told you otherwise, they were wrong. An older woman, clearly one of the more experienced weavers, raised her hand tentatively. Yes, sister? Amara encouraged. Ma'am, we have been told that if we don't meet the quotas, we will lose our jobs. And the quotas? They are very difficult to meet while maintaining the quality standards we were taught. What's your name, sister? Mary Wanjiku, ma'am. Mary, How long have you been weaving? 23 years, ma'am. I learned from my mother, who learned from her mother. And in those 23 years, have you ever been asked to compromise quality for speed? Mary's eyes flicked nervously toward Mr. Okello. Not until recently, ma'am. Amara felt her anger building, but she kept her voice calm. Mary, and all of you, I want you to know that job security comes from excellence, not from cutting corners. A company that asks you to do poor work will not survive long enough to provide you with careers. She turned to Mr. Okello. Sir, I need to speak with you privately. Interior Facility Office 30 minutes later. The conversation with Mr. Okello was difficult but necessary. He had been hired for his efficiency and results-driven approach, but he fundamentally misunderstood what made Nakado Aching different from other textile companies. I was trying to maximize profitability, he protested. Isn't that what business is about? Our business is about creating value for everyone involved, Samuel explained patiently. Short-term profits that damage long-term sustainability aren't really profits at all, they're borrowing from the future. But the competition. We don't compete on price, Amara said firmly. We compete on value, on story, on the relationships we build with our customers and our artisans. The moment we start cutting corners to match competitors' prices, we become competitors instead of leaders. Mr. Okello was terminated that afternoon, with a generous severance package but clear understanding that his approach was incompatible with the company's values. With Mr. Okello gone, Amara and Samuel faced the immediate challenge of getting production back on track while rebuilding morale and maintaining quality standards. Amara called another all-hands meeting, this time with supervisors and workers from all departments. I know today has been disruptive and confusing, she began. But I want to use this moment to recommit to our founding principles. She gestured to Samuel. This man taught me that business success without moral success is just another form of failure. We're not here just to make textiles, we're here to preserve traditions, support communities, and create beautiful things that bring joy to people's lives. James Mwangi, one of the lead weavers, raised his hand. Ma'am, what about the orders that are behind schedule? Will the customers cancel? Some might, Amara acknowledged honestly. But I'd rather lose customers than lose our integrity. And I believe that customers who truly value what we do will understand when we explain the situation. What if they don't? Asked Sarah Matindi, a young apprentice. What if we lose too much business? Samuel stepped forward. Then we'll rebuild, just like we did before. But we'll rebuild on a foundation of truth, not compromise. Over the next 3 days, Amara, Samuel, and the Mombasa team worked around the clock to assess every piece in production. Items that didn't meet their standards were set aside for reweaving or discarded entirely. It was expensive and time-consuming, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, Amara made the difficult phone calls to clients whose orders would be delayed. Interior Facility Office late evening. Ms. Richardson, Amara spoke into her phone to the buyer from Bergdorf Goodman. I'm calling to inform you that your order will be delayed by 2 weeks. Delayed? Ms. Nakado, we have a firm deadline for our spring collection launch. This is extremely unprofessional. I understand your frustration, and I take full responsibility. We discovered that some items in your order didn't meet our quality standards, and we're remaking them rather than shipping substandard products. There was a long pause. You're delaying shipment because the quality was too high. No, because it was too low. Our reputation is built on excellence, and I won't compromise that for convenience. Another pause. Ms. Nakado, do you realize you could just ship what you have and most people would never notice the difference? Yes, ma'am. But we would notice. And eventually you would notice. And most importantly, our artisans would know they had been asked to do work beneath their capabilities. Ms. Richardson's tone softened slightly. In 20 years of retail buying, I've never had a supplier delay an order to improve quality rather than meet a deadline. Does that change anything? Actually, yes. Yes, it does. Take the 2 weeks. And Ms. Nakato? Make sure those pieces are everything you promised. We're going to market them as examples of what authentic craftsmanship looks like. Exterior Mombasa facility dawn, 1 week later. Amara stood in the courtyard of the facility, watching the sunrise paint the sky in familiar shades of gold and orange. The past week had been exhausting but transformative. Production was back on track, morale had improved dramatically, and the quality of work was better than ever. Samuel joined her, carrying 2 cups of the strong Kenyan tea they had both grown to love. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question he had posed so many times before. About firing Mr. Okello? About delaying shipments? About potentially losing clients? Amara considered. No. No regrets. Even though it cost us money? Especially because it cost us money. Easy choices don't build character, remember? Samuel smiled. I remember. And I'm proud of you, Amara. Prouder than you know. Why? Because you faced the first real test of your values under pressure, and you passed. Many business leaders talk about ethics when it's convenient, but few are willing to pay the price when ethics conflict with profit. They sip their tea in comfortable silence, watching the workers arrive for the morning shift. There was something different in their bearing now, a pride that hadn't been there before, a sense of ownership in their work. Samuel, Amara said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about expansion. Oh? Not the kind those investors wanted, not mass production or cost cutting, but thoughtful expansion. What if we created a franchise model? Small, locally owned workshops that use our techniques and quality standards but remain rooted in their communities? Samuel's eyes lit up. Explain. Instead of building huge factories that strip away the personal connection, we could create networks of small workshops. Each one would be owned by master artisans from that community, but they'd be part of our larger brand. We'd provide training, quality standards, marketing support, and access to international markets. That's brilliant, Samuel said slowly. It would allow for growth while maintaining the personal touch that makes our products special. And it would create opportunities for artisans to become business owners themselves, not just employees. It would spread ownership and wealth throughout the communities instead of concentrating it in corporate headquarters. There would be challenges. Quality control across multiple independent operations, maintaining brand consistency, logistics. All solvable problems, Amara said confidently. And think about the story it would tell. Each piece wouldn't just be made by Nakato Aching, it would be made by Nakato Aching in partnership with the Wanjiku Workshop in Mombasa, or the Mutiso Collective in Nairobi, or the Nakato Family Atelier in Kigoma. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through the implications. It would be a completely different business model, he said finally. Instead of employees, we'd have partners. Instead of factories, we'd have communities. Instead of a corporation, we'd have a movement. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Amara, Samuel's voice was filled with excitement. I think it might be a revolutionary thing. The first annual Nakato Aching Artisan Partnership Summit was unlike any business conference Samuel or Amara had ever attended. Instead of suits and PowerPoint presentations, the hall was filled with colorful traditional dress and the sounds of multiple languages as artisans from across East Africa shared techniques, stories, and dreams. Amara stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of over 200 master weavers, dyers, and textile artists, all now partners in what had become the largest network of traditionally based textile producers in Africa. 2 years ago, she began, I was a village weaver with one loom and a bundle of blue yarn. I thought success meant selling enough cloth to pay my family's debts. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience, many of them had similar stories. Today, we are a network of 87 workshops across 6 countries, employing over 1,500 artisans, and exporting to 42 nations. But those numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the real story. She gestured to the audience. The real story is Mama Grace in Kampala, who used her profits from our partnership to send her daughter to university. The real story is young Samuel in Dar es Salaam, who transformed his grandmother's weaving circle into a thriving business that supports 12 families. The audience murmured appreciation, recognizing their own stories in her words. The real story is that we proved business doesn't have to be about taking, it can be about giving. It doesn't have to be about competition, it can be about collaboration. It doesn't have to be about getting rich, it can be about getting everyone rich together. Standing ovation filled the hall. These were people who had experienced firsthand the difference between exploitative business practices and truly collaborative ones. Samuel took the podium next, his once frail frame now strong and confident. When I first met Amara, he said, I was a broken man who had lost everything because I forgot that business is fundamentally about people, not products. I had to become a beggar to remember what it meant to be human. He paused, looking directly at Amara. This remarkable woman taught me that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you cultivate. Not what you hoard, but what you share. Not what you extract from communities, but what you contribute to them. The speech was interrupted by Dr. Patricia Komu, the South African Minister of Trade and Industry, who had been invited as a keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Komu said, what we're witnessing here isn't just a business success story, it's a new model for African economic development. The Nakato Aching Partnership Network has demonstrated that we can compete in global markets without sacrificing our values, our traditions, or our communities. She held up a beautiful Kent stole. This piece was created by the Zulu Nakato Workshop in KwaZulu-Natal. It incorporates traditional Zulu beadwork patterns into Kent weaving techniques, creating something entirely new while honoring both traditions. The artisan who made it, Sarah Madansila, earned more from this one piece than she used to make in a month. The audience erupted in applause again. Sarah, a young woman in traditional Zulu dress, stood and waved, tears streaming down her face. Exterior Conference Center Gardens evening. As the formal sessions ended, the real magic began. Artisans from different countries and traditions gathered in small groups, sharing techniques, discussing challenges, and forming partnerships that transcended national boundaries. Amara and Samuel walked through the gardens, stopping to listen to conversations in Swahili, Kikuyu, Luganda, Zulu, and languages they didn't recognize but whose passion was universal. Look at this, Samuel marveled, pausing beside a group where a Maasai beadworker was teaching geometric patterns to Ghanaian Kent weavers while an Ethiopian cotton spinner demonstrated her techniques to fascinated onlookers from Tanzania. This is what I dreamed of, Amara said softly. Not just preserving traditions, but letting them grow and cross-pollinate. Creating something new while honoring what came before. A young man approached them, David Karui, who had started as an apprentice in their Nairobi workshop and now ran his own successful partnership location. Ms. Amara, Mr. Samuel, he said respectfully, I wanted to thank you. Not just for the business opportunity, but for showing us that we could be proud of our traditions while still being modern, still being competitive. You did the work, David, Amara replied. We just provided the framework. No, David shook his head firmly. You provided something more valuable than money or business plans. You provided vision. You showed us that we didn't have to choose between honoring our ancestors and building our futures. As they continued their walk, Samuel and Amara found themselves at a quiet spot overlooking the gardens where the conference participants continued their animated conversations. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had just walked past that baobab tree? Samuel asked. Every day, Amara admitted. And I'm grateful every day that I didn't. Even with all the challenges? The difficult decisions, the pressure from investors, the responsibility for so many livelihoods? Especially because of those challenges. They've taught me who I really am, what I really value. Success without character is hollow. Growth without purpose is meaningless. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. I spent decades building a business empire, and when it collapsed, I realized I had built it on sand, on extraction, competition, and self-interest. But what we've built together, this is built on rock. What kind of rock? The rock of human dignity. the rock of mutual respect, the rock of shared prosperity, the rock of understanding that true success lifts everyone, not just the person at the top. Interior Conference Center, late evening. The conference was ending with a traditional celebration. Musicians from different countries played together, creating fusion sounds that reflected the cultural cross-pollination happening throughout the summit. Dancers wore garments created by the various partnership workshops, each piece telling a story of collaboration and creativity. Amara was approached by Ms. Jennifer Walsh, a journalist from the Financial Times who had been covering the event. "Ms. Nakato," she said, "I have to ask, don't you ever worry that this model isn't sustainable? That economic pressures will eventually force you to compromise, to become more like traditional corporations?" Amara considered the question while watching a group of teenagers, children of the artisan partners, playing games while wearing miniature versions of traditional garments. "Ms. Walsh," she said finally, "do you see those children?" "Yes. They're growing up in a world where they see their parents as business owners, not just workers. They see traditional crafts as valuable, not obsolete. They see cooperation as stronger than competition. They're learning that business can be a force for good." She paused, watching as one of the children, Peter, now 16 and already an accomplished weaver, helped teach a younger child a basic pattern. "Those children are our sustainability strategy. They're growing up with values that prioritize community alongside profit, tradition alongside innovation, character alongside achievement. When they take over their parents' workshops and start their own businesses, they'll carry those values forward." But what about market pressures? Competition from mass producers? The temptation of quick profits? "There will always be those pressures," Amara acknowledged. "But we've proven that there's a market for authenticity, for products that carry meaning as well as function. Our customers don't just buy our textiles, they buy our story, our values, our commitment to doing business differently." Samuel joined the conversation. "Ms. Walsh, you're asking if our model is sustainable, but I think you're asking the wrong question." "What should I be asking?" "You should be asking whether the traditional model is sustainable. Is it sustainable to extract wealth from communities without giving back? Is it sustainable to treat workers as disposable resources? Is it sustainable to prioritize short-term profits over long-term relationships?" He gestured toward the celebration around them. "What you see here, this joy, this pride, this sense of ownership and community, this is what sustainable business looks like. It's business that creates value for everyone involved, that strengthens communities instead of exploiting them, that builds legacies instead of just bank accounts." The village that had once struggled with poverty and limited opportunities was now a thriving center of textile arts. The original workshop had been expanded into a campus that included training facilities, a design center, and a small museum dedicated to East African textile traditions. But more importantly, the success had rippled throughout the community. New businesses had emerged, restaurants to serve the increasing number of visitors, transportation services, even a small hotel. The local school had been renovated and expanded, and a health clinic now served the region. Amara stood under the same baobab tree where she had first encountered Samuel, now surrounded by